Hello, everyone. Phil Turek here. I'm pretty excited. This is going to be somewhat of a long episode. For a long time, I've been struggling with making sense of the world around me, and now I've created a model that gives me a worldview that I feel like I can make predictions about the future and understand current events pretty well. So the title of this episode is Below the Law. All right, here we go. In the future, there will be a vibrant, self-sustaining human civilization on Mars. The high road to Mars is one built on a foundation of gracious professionalism, the bedrock ethos of the first robotics competition. The earthbound dreamers of today, who are working to open the high road to a future Martian civilization, are the ancestors of tomorrow's Martians. I'm Phil Turek, one such ancestral Martian. Look at what I'm trying to do by creating simulated Martian cultural ambassadors to act as positive social influencers to somewhat depolarize society here in the United States. Imagine how much even better it would be if the United States were to bring real Martian ambassadors here. Okay, Below the Law, Season 2, Episode 7. And today is Sunday, March 9th, 2025, as I record this. I think I figured out how to organize civilized society. So bear with me. I'm going to try to explain this to you. As you grow up, that would take you from the bottom of this chart towards the top. When you're a child, you are below the law. Then you go through the age of reason, about ages 7 to 9 for most people, where they learn to tell right from wrong, where they develop a moral compass. And then for most of our lives, we're adults functioning within the law. And sometimes it's necessary to edit the law, create new laws. Uh, can't quite say above the law because that has a annotation that's not quite what I'm trying to suggest these days. All right, but let me get into a little more details. So, below the law, when you're a toddler, you can live in a make-believe world. And if you have a very doting mom who's just always comforting you no matter what you do, you have a harsh dad, very firm, someone who actually hates the law. If you happen to have a compounding problem like you have a reading challenge where you end up being bullied at school a lot, then the last little piece is if you happen to be a sociopath. And just to remind you of the definition of that, that is someone who's not really able to understand the distinction between right and wrong very well. They don't get the endorphin release that the rest of us normally get when you are being helpful for someone. So they have to make their own way in the world, and it's possible under the right conditions that they go the other way. And instead of getting an endorphin release by being helpful to other people, they pretty much teach themselves to get an endorphin release by being hurtful to other people. So, our particular current leader apparently had the mantra from his role models of attack, 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 and then deny, and then no matter what happens in the end, declare, claim victory. All right. So for those of us who make it through the age of reason, and now we are functioning adults, we operate within the law. And think of this as you have your moral compass, but you're following the laws, which is like following roads. In fact, think of it as long as you are obeying traffic signs and stopping at stop signs and not going the wrong way on one-way streets, you are visually reaffirming to the community around you that you are a law-abiding person. And the goal of our laws is to take us towards liberty and justice for all. But there might be laws that don't take us there. Maybe they're unjust laws. Maybe there are no laws. So there are people in our society, civilization, who have to rely on their moral compass and work towards creating laws or editing laws that are bad laws. And so think of this as being the hikers or explorers or the leaders who survey the land and they see that is a more just place to be. That is, uh, more liberty for each individual. And there aren't any roads taking us there yet, but this is how we're going to get there. Or to look at an existing law or road and say, that one is taking us in the wrong direction and it should be discontinued. So role models in the real world of people like this would be Muhammad Gandhi and Nelson Mandela and Rosa Parks. These are people who were helping lead us to more liberty and more justice for everyone. And technically speaking, the creators and editing of laws in our current federal government should be the legislative branch of the federal government. But I want to come back to this one for a moment. So this is somewhat of a caricature of our current leader. And from my viewpoint, Mama there with the red hat is where he has to go running to all the time for reassurance that he's doing great things. Oh, yeah, you're the best. You are the king. And they have to shower him with praise. So, let's put his face on money. Let's put his face on Mount Rushmore. Let's name an airport after him. Let's do this and this and this and this and that, all just reassuring the kid that yes, we love you. Okay, and then there's I'll call him Papa Putin. So someone I feel who back in 1987, businessman went to Russia, Moscow, and I feel like due to some fetish or other, got compromised, and it's a hold over him now. Maybe. Uh, Independently of that, he needs a papa figure, and there's one, a billionaire who owns lots of land, even better than what his dad was able to do. So it's not someone he's going to tend to disrespect, I don't think, uh, not go against. That's my impression and feeling. So, Mama, MAGA, Papa Putin, and our current leader. Not good for the executive branch. Let me add to that and say, in this make-believe world that he's still living in, because I'm going to say he never made it through the age of reason and became what the rest of us would consider to be law-abiding citizens. So in his world, and if you want to get into it, you have to be willing to set aside your moral compass because it's not just a make-believe world where he's the king, but because he's a sociopath and he doesn't understand the idea of right versus wrong, and he takes pleasure from being cruel, you have to be willing to become a sociopath. And a loose way of that word is to say you say stuff and you don't care what the consequence is of whatever you say. You don't mean it so literally that you can't change what you say the next day, contradict yourself because you didn't mean it very much in the first place. So you say things, you have to demonstrate cruelty to stay in his make-believe world. And there are tens and millions of people who are with him in there, serving the role of mama, giving him comforting reassurance and praise, tons and tons of praise. Now, the caution for anyone who does that, if you decide to return to the real world from the make-believe one, where everything he does is right, and you're actually at peace right now, the people in that world, because the king reigns, the king knows all, the king never lies, the king will make it all right. If you decide to leave that make-believe world and return to the adult world, then once you step out, you're all the way out. You become an enemy. And this would be how people get labeled as being part of the deep state. I would say anyone in the deep state is someone who's following their moral compass. So there you go. That's a difference between him and me. Now, keep in mind that 5 years, 4 years ago, there was an election, and not all U.S. citizens voted for the king. And he does tend to keep a grudge forever. So you're wondering, why is there so much pain being inflicted on the federal government today? And there's your answer. We didn't we didn't vote for him 4 years ago, so destroy our lives as much as he can, and while he's at it, take down the federal government as much as possible. Disable it to the greatest extent possible. All right, so everything from that point of view tends to make much more sense now. And then add in a couple of other things. Being a real president is hard. Being a king is much easier, particularly if you want to be a bully, or that's the only way you know how to function. So, hence the bullying of so many different entities now. Pick one, but don't pick Papa Putin. The other thing, speaking of hatred and endless revenge, he has a particular grudge against former President Obama, and it's understandable how that happens if you want to look it up again, April 30th, 2011. But keep in mind, Obama was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. And so that is a must-have goal for our current leader. And that means make any deal, no matter what, so that he feels he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. And then one more slight against Obama, do what he can to end birthright citizenship, at least for Obama, if not for everyone else. Okay, so from this worldview, current events make a lot more sense now. But my goal in life is to help future Martians to design a better civilization. So, current status for the federal government. Our legislative branch was functioning, we'll say, but once C-SPAN entered the chambers, once live television was broadcasting speeches on the floor in Congress, it devolved into political theater where a speaker would get up, make their case, and then get rewarded with money in terms of campaign contributions and airtime on networks like Fox TV. And apparently, it's been quite a while since representatives have had meaningful discussions in Congress on passing legislation, editing existing laws, and doing what they were hired to do. So, political theater, judicial branch has been gummed up, just so slow. When the 9/11 attacks took place in 2001, we went out as a nation and rounded up a bunch of people. They're still awaiting trial. And this is 24 years later. When the January 6th riots took place, it was pretty clear, who's to blame for that. And 4 years later, oh, maybe it's going to come to trial this year. Oh, maybe not. And you know, the guy's been reelected, uh, and there was a full 4 year time span where justice was just being delayed, delayed, delayed. So our judicial branch is too slow, basically. And then in the executive branch, I've kind of touched on that one already. Uh, the complicating factor is social media. And it's been pointed out that one person can tweet something, and then the billionaire retweets it, and then a podcaster interviews him about that, and now millions of people believe it. before it even gets out into the real world. And a populist demagogue is someone who, I mean, you can look up the definition of it. We've got one, but the social media cocoon that lets you stay cut off from uh, reality, the real world, is a strong barrier. And then you could, to help keep you in that cocoon, you have stuff like culture wars. So you get all riled up and that discourages, people within the cocoon from looking out and seeing what the real world is like. So, yikes. And then if you're a child, you're not really very good at building things up. It's much more fun to blow things up and tear things down and be destructive. Uh, our own example where I lived is the riots that flipped over cars and attacked the lifeguard stations. So only destructive chaos is what can be accomplished currently in our current political environment here in 2025. I was thinking I would go online and show you, current headlines and show you how this model of understanding this worldview works and explains behavior that we see going on. But that's not the main focus. I'm trying to help future Martians come up with a better civilization. So here's this graph that shows how the cultures of the United States are really 11 major ones, and they each have their own characteristics. For a long time, it was the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States that held these groups together. And right now, they have fractured apart, no telling when they might reunite. Hard to say. But I am, the direction I want to go in is to try to build a new national narrative that unites them or reunites them. And so here's just a listing. I don't know if I'm covering up part of it, of what I would consider to be, or someone would consider to be, positive traits from each one of those subgroups, and a little bit of artistic expression or cultural identifiers with each of those subgroups. And food is always a big part. So these different subgroups have their own cultural taste, literally. And whatever narrative we're coming up with, I'm trying to integrate the better features from it so that everyone can buy into it. Really trying to create a Martian civilization that incorporates our better features and avoids some of the problems that I've just outlined in the beginning of this video. Here's a somewhat dated now scorecard from the Social Progress Index. That's a group that grades governments around the world. And this is the scorecard for the United States for a few years back. And they color coded it so that blue is above average and red is below average. And you can see there's only one blue dot and it says quality weighted universities. That's it. And that explains why foreign governments send their best and their brightest to the United States to get higher education at Yale and Princeton and Cornell, and then they return home after that. There's not enough motivation for them to want to stay here under these conditions. And so, again, or maybe news to you this time, what I'm hoping to do is build a consensus to build an analog Martian settlement and try out new cultural values, trying to germinate what we would hope to be a better civilization over the course of a field season at an expanded Mars base. And again, I feel like the minimum size to expand it to, instead of 6 people at something like the Mars Desert Research Station operated by the Mars Society, I would make it at least 53 people at an expanded base. Now, I surveyed students that I'm working with at the moment, uh, came out of retirement for this one, just for a short time longer. And I asked them what's broken with the world. And their list started off with corrupt politics and then violence and then nuclear weapons threat and racism, double standards, and those were the main ones. What if I drew your attention back to an advanced democratic civilization, advanced not so much in technology, but nobody starved. But in terms of democracy, they were the best example that I know of. And this was hundreds of years ago. They didn't have political corruption. They didn't have any special perks for serving in government. You were treated the same. You didn't get a special place at the table, so to speak. There was no compensation for you, no material rewards. And if you didn't continue to have the support of the community, you were replaced. Okay. They didn't have violence. They never had a standing army. They didn't have rape. They didn't have robbery. People didn't lie. Uh, they didn't have nuclear weapons, kind of obvious. They didn't have double standards or racism. One one time, delegation of them visited London, and they saw these homeless refugees out on the street, and they asked, "What the heck is going on here?" And their guides told them, "Oh, those are refugees from the wars in Germany over in Europe, and they were just helpless and homeless." And the delegation from this civilization said, "That's not right," and they offered them land back in their home country uh, to relocate to and to live a better life. Okay, so who am I talking about? The five nations of the Iroquois. And how did they deal with immigration, right? People coming over. So they welcomed them with open arms. So now they're called the Six Nations of the Iroquois, having had taken in refugees from Ohio area. So I feel that one of the significant features that caused their civilization to be so democratic, so civilized, so equal rights for men and women, equal tolerance for various religions, all this, all the little check boxes that we wish we could check off for ourselves. I believe a contributing factor to that was their architecture. They did not have private land ownership, whereas the historical colonial United States that, is who we've become today, land ownership is everything. If you have money, if you have land, then you have power. And it's associated that the richer you are, the more powerful you should be. Whereas the Indians purely had common property, community property. They cared for the land as a community. They cared for each other. They took care of their sick. They took care of their old. They didn't uh, send people off to old people. Yeah, nursing homes. They kept them with them. Their organization was the family, then the clan, and then the tribe. And they were the foundation for our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution of the United States. They influenced it. I propose that you Martians, as you establish your government, your civilization, your cultural values, revisit and go in depth into what you can learn about this advanced democratic civilization that was created by Hiawatha and some other guy hundreds of years ago and flourished in the northeast of the United States, particularly upstate New York, where I grew up. Okay, so I'm going to close this out by saying I asked AI to generate an Iroquois longhouse with Martian colonists on it, although I suppose you would prefer I had said settlers. And I'll just close out with these humorous images. The top left one is structurally the most longhousey one with an airlock port of the three, but it shows the juxtaposition of what I'm trying to say. Culturally, the Native Americans had the right path to liberty and justice. And I hope you Martians make it much further down the road than we did. All right, that's it for now. Bye.